Welcome back, everyone. I think it's been 5 months since we've been in this room, so it's been too long and good to be back. So it is 3:36 p.m. and I call this meeting of the Board of Education to order. I'll call the roll, please.
Ms. Clemente?
I am here.
Mr. Farrell?
Here.
Judge Mays?
Here.
Mr. Voss?
Here.
Dr. Wright? Dr. Wright? Here, can you hear me? Yes, thank you.
Superintendent Macaluso, do you have any corrections or modifications to the agenda?
Thank you, President Voss. At this time, there are no corrections or modifications to the agenda.
Then I move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
Call for the vote, please.
Ms. Clemente?
Aye.
Mr. Farrell?
Aye.
Judge Mays?
Aye.
Mr. Voss?
Aye.
Dr. Wright? Aye.
And with that, we'll move into our work session. Superintendent Macaluso.
Thank you, President Voss. At this time, we have our first report, and I'd like to introduce you to Suzanne Morey, who serves as Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. And so she's going to provide us an update regarding the reopening plans for 2021 school year. Ms. Morey?
President Voss, Superintendent Macaluso, members of the board. This afternoon, Eric DeCicero, our Executive Director of HR, and Rick Macias, our Athletic Director, and I will be sharing an update on the plans for our return to school. We will also be joined by Mr. Randy Evitz, the Public Health Director from the Pueblo Department of Public Health and Environment, so welcome. Mr. Evitz is going to be sharing an overview of the current state and local COVID-19 statistics and trends. And then after our presentation, we will have an opportunity for the board to ask questions from our team as well as Mr. Evitz. And we also have a preview of a video that we have put together, our communications team has put together to share with our families and community. And that's how we'll end our presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Check. We have Dick Bump joining us via telephone, and Dr. Wright and Jerry Pachone. Can you hear Ms. Morey okay?
Yes, it's coming through fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we welcomed our teachers and staff back to our buildings during the past 2 weeks. Their work so far has been prioritized on addressing the health and physical building changes that need to take place in order to prepare our buildings for in-person student learning. Masks were handed out to all staff. There is an expectation that masks are worn by everyone who enters the building. Temperature checks and health screenings are also occurring daily for our staff. Staff are expected to social distance, and all of our school-wide as well as our district PD so far has been occurring virtually. A focus this past week has been on moving extraneous furniture out from our classrooms and offices and buildings in order to accommodate the 3 to 6 feet of distance which will be required between students and staff this year. Staff are taking home their personal items in some cases, and then also our facilities department is picking up extra furniture for storage. Student technology devices, which are very important this year, as you know, have been sanitized. New technology is being delivered to buildings, and technology distribution systems are being prepared for distribution to all and each of our K-12 students as soon as students are back. Health and safety signs are being printed, which will be hung throughout our buildings. Those will be related to hand washing, social distancing, mask wearing, the entry routine, and so forth. We're also putting the 6-foot distance stickers down on the floors in key locations. Additional forehead scanning thermometers have arrived. We are distributing those 15 per building in preparation for the daily temperature taking and the health screening of each of our students, staff, and essential visitors. Water bottles for staff and students are on order, and specialized accommodation PPE has also been ordered. Principals are strategizing for one-way hallways, specialized lunch routines to ensure social distancing, and while eating, and then those dismissal and arrival routines that will be very specific this year. So it's been very, very busy. On top of that, we have had virtual professional development for all of our teachers and principals to include, and this is new, we have a new curriculum pilot for 612 ELA. We thought this was prudent, and all of our middle and high schools bought into this pilot. It was optional. We thought this would be important because this pilot curriculum will provide digital access to students and teachers throughout this year. And then, of course, as you remember, we have new ELA curriculum at the elementary level. So we have been doing all of that professional development as well. We've provided professional development on Nearpod, which is the digital learning app training, to all of our teachers and principals. There's been content-specific training related to COVID preparations, such as teaching in a hybrid distance learning model, as well as some of those specialty guidelines that need to be followed in the high aerosol classrooms. And then we've also provided ESS training, specialized ESS training specifically for our secondary teachers. As you know, D60 felt it was important to offer our families the choice, either of an in-person learning option at the elementary level that is 4 days a week, at the middle and high school level that is a hybrid model, 2 days in person, 2 days from home, or to opt into a full-time virtual learning option for their K-12 students. We recently communicated out to families and extended the deadline to request the full online option to Friday, August 14th. And as of earlier this afternoon, we have had approximately 3,600 students requesting full-time virtual learning online, and the numbers are still climbing. We have also received a number of staff health accommodation requests, and HR is working through those one by one in order to support those teachers and other staff who would qualify for a variety of different potential accommodations. We've also received some feedback from our parents, some parents, and actually even some staff, who are asking if there would be any possibility that their child could be taught by a teacher from their home school. And from staff to say, with the online learning, would there be any way that we could teach our own students from our home school? And so our original plan today was to share more detail about that online virtual learning model. But due to these significantly increasing numbers and adjusting for staff accommodations, we're continuing to revise and explore some changes to that model at this time. I know we recently communicated out details to our families about virtual learning, but I do want to caution everyone that with this and probably other things down the road, we need to remain flexible. And in fact, today we met with some principals and our executive directors to explore how we might make some shifts to provide an even stronger model that more closely aligns, a closer alignment between the in-person instruction and the full virtual at-home instruction. And so details of these plans are still in process and will be shared as soon as they're finalized. At this time, Mr. Macias, I would invite you up, and I will move to the side. And Mr. Macias is going to share some updates regarding athletics.
Good afternoon, President Voss, school board members, and Superintendent Mrs. Macaluso. Last week, the governor's response team approved the CHASA calendar for the 2020-2021 athletic and activities school year, which included the sports-specific COVID-19 guidelines. This season will be referred to as Season A, the fall season, which consists of boys golf, cross country, boys tennis, and softball. Season A started August 3rd for golf, August 10th for boys tennis and softball, and for cross country on August 12th. Each season has been shortened to 8 to 9 weeks with playoff modifications. After Season A, we will go into a 2.5-month moratorium of competition, which starts in mid-October and will end on January 3rd. Starting on January 4th, sports will resume with Season B, which will consist of the traditional winter sports. This season will be shortened to 9 weeks and playoff modifications. And this season will also conclude on March 6th with the state basketball tournament. Season C will start February 22nd for football and March 1st for the rest of the fall sports, which were postponed. And that includes volleyball, boys soccer, and gymnastics. Football will be the last to finish up Season C with the state championships on May 8th. Season D will be the traditional spring sports, and they will start on April 26th. This season will conclude with the baseball championships scheduled for June 26th. The CHASA activities will stay the same for music and student leadership, but the speech and debate festival season has been moved to run from October 1st and end on January 30th. The speech tournament season will run from November 1st to March 20th. Questions?
I have just a simple question. When you talk about the dates for each of those seasons, does that include the preparatory practice date times, or will the practice happen before the beginning of this season? Does the season begin the games?
Some
or
off-season practices.
Yeah.
We haven't decided on that yet. We're still working on that.
So if we look at boys and girls cross country, when would their first meet be scheduled?
Next weekend. So they'll have about,
So they had a couple weeks.
yeah. And right now, CHASA did revise the practice time to 3 days before first competition.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So as we're thinking through our return to school, I wanted the board to be aware of specific cohort contexts of our in-person learning model. At the elementary and middle school levels, our cohorting can be more efficient, is probably the best word for it. At the elementary level, our principal's goal is to cohort whenever possible down to the classroom level. At the middle school level, as you remember, only half of our middle schoolers are going to be in school at any one time. And then they are additionally going to be cohorted by grade level. And don't forget, overall in-person numbers at all of our schools are going to be smaller due to the students electing online instruction. In general, the smaller the cohort, the less the exposure. Given the very nature of our high school model, where students at different grades may be taking classes together, like band or choir or some of the upper grade classes, cohorting is significantly more of a challenge. In our high schools, since we are a hybrid model, it reduces the students in half, and then once you subtract the students who have requested online, this means that a school the size of South High School, which typically is a little bit over 1,000 students, may only have about 350 students in their building on any given day. So we've reduced the exposure significantly. However, things like athletics, where students practice together after school, does increase the exposure for certain students across the cohorts. So this is definitely something we're going to need to continue to watch closely. And it does bring us some concern regarding our ability to control the environment and exposure for our older students. So I just wanted you all to be aware of that. Should we do questions now or at the end? What makes sense to you?
I think we can wait.
Okay, great. Our superintendent and district senior leadership is continuing to reassess the current health and safety context, I can assure you, pretty much daily. And we are working very closely with the Pueblo Department of Public Health and Environment in determining when it may be necessary to move our schools to a more or less restrictive instructional model based on the current health context. These decisions will not necessarily be based upon one metric. I know there have been questions, well, what's the cut point? There's not one single cut point, but instead, it's going to need to be a more thoughtful strategic weighing of a variety of different external and internal metrics. Some of the external measures are the local rate of positive cases in Pueblo, local hospitalizations, and local numbers of COVID cases in the past 14 days. Some of you may have seen some of those measures that have been publicized. Possible internal measures might include confirmed COVID cases for our staff and our students, direct COVID exposure rates, absenteeism, and potential staffing challenges. And now I'd like to turn it over to Mr. DeCicero, our Executive Director of HR. He is going to share our staff and student COVID response decision-making matrix process.
Good afternoon, everybody. So as far as response goes, we have, sure, let me pull this up here. As far as response goes, we know we must be prepared to monitor symptoms and respond to exposure, cases, and outbreaks in our schools. We have created a visual decision tree for both staff and students and a process that assesses symptoms and gives direction to our administrators and supervisors on how to handle a variety of situations that they may encounter and be presented with each day. This process is fairly complex and continues to evolve. In fact, yesterday afternoon we received some additional new guidance from the state, CDE, the state, and the local health departments. Our process has been approved by our local health department, and we will be incorporating the new guidance into our process that we received yesterday. Though there are some slight differences in the processes for staff and students, they will mirror each other very closely. Our process will involve contact tracing and a partnership, including day-to-day interactions with our local health department. We will also have a COVID coordinator from the HR staff that will monitor and clear staff to return to work when they have symptoms, have to stay home due to an isolation or quarantine.
The Colorado Department of Health and Environment, as Mr. DeCicero said, has recently published guidelines and then revised those guidelines defining outbreaks in schools. These guidelines are always subject to revision. I think we need to remember that. If one or more criteria that I'm about to share are met, it's considered a confirmed outbreak. Outbreak response will vary by criteria met. All confirmed outbreaks are posted on the Colorado Department of Health and Environment website. So here are the current definitions. The first one is specific to a classroom/cohort outbreak. 2 or more confirmed COVID cases among students, teachers, or staff from separate households with onset within 14 days in a single classroom or cohort. So 2 or more confirmed. A school-wide outbreak is characterized by one of the following. In schools practicing cohorts like D60, 3 or more classrooms or cohorts with cases from separate households that meet the classroom cohort outbreak definition that occurs within 14 days, or in schools not practicing cohorting, 2 or more confirmed COVID-19 cases from separate households with onset within 14 days in the same schools. This would be student, teachers, or staff. Or 5% or more unrelated students, teachers, staff have confirmed COVID-19 within a 14-day period. And there's a minimum of 10 unrelated students, teachers, staff to qualify for that 5%. And now I would like to invite up Mr. Evitz. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Mr. Evitz is the Public Health Director from Pueblo Department of Public Health and Environment, and he is here to share an update with us.
Good afternoon, President Boss, members of the board, Superintendent Russo. Thank you for having me today. It's been a while since I've been in front of the board. I want to say that first I want to compliment the district and all of the work that they've put into this. They've been a tremendous partner as we've moved forward through this last 5 months that seems like 10 years. There's been a lot of changes and things are rapidly changing every day. As was noted, the guidelines that came out yesterday were a revision that were from the guidelines that were sent out last week. And they expect these guidelines will be revised again after Labor Day based on data that they're gathering from a national and local perspective of kids returning to school. So I think the biggest message now is to expect change constantly and just be flexible and ready to respond. I wanted to share just a little bit of updating on data. I'm sure some of you have seen some of this, but I think it's kind of a nice review and it gives you a little context. To date, there's been about 602,000 people tested in Colorado, and 51,756 of those have been positive, which is about an 8.6% positivity. About 6,685 people hospitalized, and there's been 1,875 deaths. You heard about outbreaks and definitions of outbreaks. Those vary a little bit from nursing homes to businesses to schools, and they each have their definition, but in total there's been 532 outbreaks across the state. The state is currently seeing about 400 new cases per day, which is pretty good. And things are looking significantly better than they did a month ago around the 4th of July. The way the numbers have gone in Pueblo as well as across the state is that they were kind of up there through May, and they dropped down significantly in June, and then we saw a very steep increase in July, which is why you saw the governor take the actions again to implement the mask order, the closing the bars, and the last call for alcohol at 10 o'clock. Since that time, or at that time around the 4th of July, the social distancing was measured by their measures that they're watching at about 40% around the state. And since then, they estimate that it's back up to about 70 to 80%, which is, I think, high for what we're seeing in our community, but across the state, that's what they're measuring. I will say that, the state is, and the Colorado School of Public Health and many other partners are trying to work on modeling and figure out what's going to happen next for a virus that we have no data for, no experience with. But that modeling is only good through the time that school starts, because we really don't have a body of evidence to inform a model about what's going to happen when school starts. They have tried to use some modeling based on what they've seen in child care centers and outbreaks in child care centers. However, that's pretty small amount of data, and so we're not sure how predictive that's going to be. At a local level, we've tested 14,063 people, and we've had 693 cases, which overall is about a 6.9% positivity, which is less than the state, but still not where we'd like to be. Those numbers shot up significantly in July based on what I told you about the social distancing and the events around the 4th of July. But our numbers are starting to come back down. But before that, our positivity was less than 5, which is where we want to be. So we're a little over that and watching that closely. We've had 34 deaths in Pueblo County. and about 89% of those have been in people age 65 or older. We've had 14 facility outbreaks in Pueblo, and currently, the hospitalizations remain fairly stable. We are on a call with the hospitals weekly, and that report is consistently 5 or less people in the hospital. Initially, when we started, there was a lot more people who were in the hospital, and the hospital was counting those numbers, but that was because we didn't have good testing and rapid testing to really identify if those people were positive or not, so they had to be treated as positive. But since that point, the numbers have been usually 5 or less that are in the hospital, which is good news for us. We've had really 3 major outbreaks in long-term care facilities. 2 of those have resolved, meaning that they've gone 28 days without additional cases, and 1 is still active, and that's University Park Care Center. At our testing site, we were averaging about 170 tests per day over the whole period, over the past 4 or 5 months, since April, I guess. But in July, our numbers for testing shot up to 204 per day. So again, we're seeing that, follow the trends of what was happening in early July. So far in August, we've averaged about 200 per day, so we've dropped a little bit, but it's really early, and it's hard to tell what that trend is going to do on an ongoing basis. So that's some local data. I also wanted to let you know that at the health department, we've identified and developed a response team for each school district, and that team includes a public health nurse, a communicable disease specialist, the one that does the contact or case investigation and contact tracing. We will have one of our communications people attached to that, an epidemiologist attached to that, and others as needed. But it's really meant to be a single point of contact for the school district, and we hope to have that communication daily, so that if something is starting to develop, our team can be responsive quickly and help where you think you need it, and continue the partnership that we've developed. So we are currently also hiring additional staff at the health department to do additional case investigation and contact tracing. We are hiring additional public health nurses and others to help with this response. Our goal for those school teams is to be able to respond within 30 minutes. That seems like a great goal for me. I don't know how ambitious it is, because I don't know yet what it's going to look like when school starts. And I want to also say that we are working with the state. We're looking at ways to expand our testing availability. Currently, we have testing 3 days per week. It's community-based testing that's available at the state fairgrounds Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We are trying to expand that to 5 or 6 days per week, using a private contract lab out of South Carolina that will come in and sort of do the whole piece, from the collection of the sample to running the test and getting the results back. That's part of an initiative on a statewide level to increase testing capacity. At the state level, they've increased their testing capacity from, they started at 160 per day, they're up to about 3,000 per day, and this week they signed a contract with 4 additional labs that will increase their capacity to about 10,000 tests per day. So we're hoping that will continue to grow. There's really 2 parts to the testing. There's the sample collection piece, which we're doing at the community-based testing site, and then there's the running of the sample and getting us the results back. I think those were the major points I wanted to hit. I'm glad to answer any other questions. I will say that there are a number of tests in the development stage through the University of Colorado and Colorado State University they're trying to get out rapid testing and some of those other things, so that will be available to schools and other facilities, especially long-term care facilities, correctional facilities, schools, any of those kind of places where we have a lot of people gathered and need to get those results quickly. So that's continuing to work, or they're continuing to work towards that, but there's a development process and a validation process that has to happen to make sure that they're useful tests for us. Any other information?
Randy, I would just like to say that I want to just thank you for your leadership. under very, very difficult circumstances. You and your team have been incredibly responsive to our district, and I appreciate the collaboration and the partnership.
Thank you.
So.
That is the conclusion of our update. So now the floor is open for questions of our team or Mr. Evans.
All right. Dr. Wright, I'd like to see if you have any questions first since you're not here.
Thank you.
Dr. Wright, if you can hold on a second. We're trying to get the audio going. Is it good? Can you try again, Dr. Wright?
Yes, I was saying thank you so very much for the presentation. I just have one question I wanted to ask. Is this
Dr. Wright, can you ask the question again? We were hearing you loud and clear, and then you kind of broke up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. The question is for our assistant superintendent,
Okay.
and I wanted to get an update on the safety plan for the buses.
So right now, our teachers are working with administration to ensure the social distancing in the classrooms by removing extraneous furniture and items so that tables or desks have that 3 to 6 feet in between, and that the teaching area, there's distance between the front of the room, typically, the teaching area and the students. All of our classrooms have the cleaning supplies that they need so that they're able to clean in between sections. We're also getting the masks ready to distribute to all of our students on the first day, should they need one or if they just need an additional one. So those are some of the pieces, also hanging up signage, etc. We have trained our staff regarding the importance of limiting sharing materials between the students and the need to disinfect those materials that must be shared. So that is in place. This is not specific to the classrooms, but we're also clarifying the routines for passing periods. In many cases, the hallways are just a one-way pass, or there's consideration for staggered passing periods so that students are not crossing. They are thinking and working through routines for students to be able to go to the restroom. So you can imagine you're not going to have a shared bathroom pass. And so there's all sorts of procedures and routines that are being shared with our staff, developed by our staff, so that they're ready for that first day.
Dr. Wright, did I also hear you ask a question about transportation, or did Ms. Maury cover that? Your question.
So the transportation is with the mask and the students. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. I apologize. Transportation, students will be expected to wear a mask on the bus. We anticipate that all of our routes will run as normal. We don't have a concern with that at this time. Students will be seated one person per seat, one student per seat, other than siblings, who will be asked to sit 2 per seat. And then in between bus routes, the interior of the buses will be disinfected.
So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Judge Mays?
Mr. Evans, thank you very much, not only for what you've helped us with here, because I know you've been involved very much, but when we say our lives have been turned upside down by this pandemic, it has to be going about 150 miles an hour for you and your staff. So thank you for all you do and the very difficult, maybe sometimes unpopular decisions that you have to make. But understand that I think, I know this board values your service, and I am sure the community does as well. I want to start out by making a statement and see if I have this right, okay? In terms of assessing the safety of our children and our staff, and anyone that comes into the school, is it safe to say that we should be driven by the scientific data as it relates to our particular community here in Pueblo? Is that a fair statement?
Yes, I think that that's a fair statement with the context of what the data is showing nationally as well.
Okay. You mentioned that you have an assigned team that is ready to go out whenever needed in both of the school districts. Although I realize that the health department, you, do not have the authority to say you have to do this or you have to do that or you have to be in person or virtual. Is your staff, however, going to say, look, based on the circumstances we see here today, this is our recommendation, what we think you ought to do? And obviously, since we've been collaborating already, I'm assuming that relationship has been firmly established at this point.
Yes, so health departments across the state under statute do have the authority to try to shut things down if we need to. However, that's not what I anticipate would be the first mode of operation. I think what we're going to rely on is these CDPHE guidelines, and we're going to work through that with your staff and really look at the data. That's what we've done all along, is we don't jump to conclusions. We try to look at the situation and the data with the guidelines that we have, and make an informed decision with our partners.
Thank you. And my final question is, you've been through, you know about our plan and everything. You've heard the presentation today. Is there anything in the plan at all that you've seen that are weaknesses that you think we ought to be addressing that perhaps we haven't addressed?
No, I think that your team has done an excellent job of looking through the details, and we've spent many hours on the phone and on Zoom calls kind of going through those. I think Ms. Morey said that it's difficult at a high school level to cohort, and I think that's going to be the place that we're going to want to watch and be really careful with. But I think that based on that and based on those challenges, the plan presented is sound, and they're doing everything possible to keep those kids in school.
Thank you for being here today.
You're welcome.
Mr. Farrell?
Thank you, Mr. Evitz. As I mentioned in our last meeting, I put a lot of value on public health officials and their perspective and input in this process, because I think, decisions do need to be driven by people who understand the situation the best, which are public health officials. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate the time that you and your staff have put in to work with the district and everything else that you're doing for the community right now.
Thank you.
I do have one question for you about, and I know you mentioned that capacity for testing is increasing. But as of right now, about how long does it take to get results from the testing site at the fairgrounds?
So that's kind of a depends answer again. So from the fairgrounds, the community-based testing site, which is free, if those tests go to the state lab is now turning those around in 3 days or less. If they go to the state lab and they're an overflow at the state, meaning that the state can't manage the volume that they receive that day, those are sent out to national labs, and those are still running 7 days to get the results back. And that's why the state is working to increase its capacity.
Okay, thank you. And then I have a few questions for Ms. Morey and Mr. DeCicero probably. I know we're in the process of doing this, so you might not have all the answers of everything that's going on, but as schools are working to look at this 3 to 6 foot distancing in the classrooms and their spaces, are you aware of issues as far as finding the space to make sure that happens? Has that come up yet, or are you aware?
So far, it has not come up. I know our executive directors have been walking the spaces with our principals, so if there were any challenges, helping to address those challenges. And so far, we haven't heard of any, but we are working closely with our principals as things come up. I think as master schedules are finalized, one of the things that our principals know they may need to do is to reassign a teacher to a different classroom if a particular section is larger than another, and so they're ready to do that. But they're still working on finalizing master schedules at this time.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned that the special accommodation PPE has been ordered. I wanted to know a little bit more about that. Is that the see-through masks, or are there a number of different things that's
There's a
inclusive in that?
variety of different things that are specialized for certain positions when working with specific students in some cases. And then also for particular individuals who've requested them for individual health concern. And I would turn that over to Mr. DeCicero. Do you want to share some of the types of PPE
Sure,
and things?
as you kind of alluded to, like, let me just get this thing here. Some of the things will require some additional accommodation, such as face shields and things like that. It truly becomes an accommodation when it's in place of something, not in addition to. So people can always wear more than, is required. Like, say I have a face mask on, I want to wear a face shield, or vice versa. So we're working through those processes with people. We do have some of that equipment on order, as far as face shields, gloves, things, safety goggles, or safety glasses, those types of items that people may be requesting as additional accommodations.
I know the demand for those items is high across the country right now. Do you anticipate having them in time?
In our last communication with Mr. Lawson, because he was kind of the one in moving forward with that, we didn't hear that there were a lot of issues with it. Some things there are, though. I mean, as you know, there are certain things like plexiglass and some things that are very difficult to find. So it's kind of on a case-by-case type of thing.
I will share one of the things that we've not yet been able to find in bulk. It are those clear masks for students and adults. We have purchased for our special education students some very nice masks. They're disposable. They are also quite expensive. We wanted to be able to mass pass those out, for example, to all of our K-2 students and teachers. And the ones that we've brought in so far fog as soon as, even though they say there are no fog, as soon as you breathe, they fog. So we are still in search of the masks with the clear openings. That has been one of the challenges that we're finding. But again, our ESS students, we do have the stuff in or on order to meet their needs, since that's a priority.
Thank you. Can you tell me a little bit about the rationale behind extending the deadline, and have you seen a lot more sign up in between the original deadline and the new deadline?
So there was a variety of rationale behind that. One is that we heard the parents were having a difficult time getting a prompt, timely response when calling for assistance. So our secretaries weren't back in the building, and typically it is our buildings that provide and help our families with basic questions about parent portal. And all of those calls were being funneled until secretaries are back to our tech department. So they were really struggling to answer and respond quickly. That was one of the main reasons. We also provided a little bit more clarity. We got some questions, so we were trying to provide some clarity that I think most of which will play into our final model. But like I said, there may be some even improvements from some of the feedback that we've gotten before we finalize what that looks like. So that was the rationale. And yes, if the last week is any evidence of the need to extend, we have seen significant increase in numbers. And even today, we continue to watch them rise in real time.
So is the deadline now close of business tomorrow?
The
So
request from parents is it was tomorrow, so the end of the day tomorrow. We do recognize that there's probably going to be some situations where we need to approve and figure out how to place students after that, but those are the numbers that we're going to be using for placement and for final decision making.
And have the challenges with having people available to answer portal questions, those have been resolved now? Is there more capacity for that now?
I think especially now that our schools are back, our front office staff is back, and I believe we have also added some temporary help, or we're in the process of getting some temporary help to assist with that as well in our technology department.
In addition, I think we communicated the process. So we've been out on Facebook, and this is how you register for online, because it is a survey within the parent portal. So just kind of getting the word out regarding the process helped.
And I guess to follow up with that, if there's been phone calls to families, was there another one when the deadline was extended? And okay,
Absolutely.
Yes.
that's everything I have. Thank you.
Ms. Clemeni?
Thank you. Once again, Mr. Everett, we really appreciate all that you are doing and all that you've done, both for the community and for our district.
Thank you.
My questions tonight are for the district plan. I certainly appreciate the challenges that you discussed around high school scheduling and academic cohorting, and I wonder if any of the high schools in particular have looked at an alternative kind of schedule that would increase that with blocking or focusing, so that teachers would and kids would only see one or, well, 3 classes or 4 classes during the entire quarter, something like that.
We did explore that with the task force of teachers and administrators who were working to provide feedback on that. That wasn't the final recommendation of that group. That was explored and discussed. I think maybe because they felt like it would be a pretty significant shift, and given our timeline, perhaps that wasn't the model they went with, but we did want to honor the input from the teachers in that task force, so we didn't land there.
And if an individual building principal and staff decided they wanted to explore that for their building, would that be?
Honestly, I would say right now, with school starting in 2 weeks, I think that would be a ginormous lift and shift. At this time, I would never say that nothing is off the table, but at this time, I think that would be a really significant shift in approach and schedule to get in place.
Sure. It would also make a big difference in exposure.
It could.
I love the decision tree that you discussed. Will it be published anywhere?
Yes,
Cool.
it will be. We'll probably have most of that information on our main page, if not the HR site on the main page itself.
Nice. Thank you. When Mrs. Moore, when you talked about the devices, one-to-one, that's very, very exciting. Are all of those new, or have we accounted for the devices that were shared last year?
So at the end of the last school year, our high school students, other than our seniors, were able to keep their device. Many of them use them in summer school. So our high schoolers right now, our rising high schoolers, other than our freshmen, most of them still have their device from last year. We are ready to distribute them to freshmen and all of the other students, K-8, K-12 we're ready to distribute. Most of the devices have come in, they've been imaged, and they're in process, the new ones, of being delivered. We have sort of one small group of devices that we're hoping will be ready for day one, that we ordered to fill out some of the gaps in our lower elementary students. But other than that, we're very confident the first week of school we'll have them for distribution.
Great. And those will be available to those families who are doing the online learning, correct?
Yes, we're also in the process of figuring out a distribution process for that. It will probably look very similar to the distribution that we had for our high school students last spring.
And we're talking one device per student, not per family.
No, one per student. So if you have 3 students, they'll each have their own device. The kindergartners and first graders with an iPad, and then the upper students with the Chromebook.
Last, just for my own curiosity, does, in this regard, does the Nearpod app work on the Chromebooks?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes? Cool.
Absolutely, yep.
Okay. I would like to just comment that I really applaud and love the alignment that you've done with the face-to-face and the online learning programs, and that I like the idea that each school is figuring out how they're going I'm a fan. So that when, it seems to me that then when, I think, or if we have to go to full-time online remote learning, that shift would be very easy to do. So thank you for making those changes, and I like that building staffs are being involved in each of the individual schools' focuses. This seems to me like this is one giant puzzle, and the pieces are moving. And so putting their little share of that puzzle together, I'm glad that everyone is involved. I have one more question, and I don't know to whom it should be addressed, but I wonder what the district responsibility is with monitoring and ensuring safety with our charter schools. Do we have a responsibility? Do we need to, I don't have any idea where this responsibility falls.
So I think I would say that we have a responsibility to work in collaboration with them and to partner with them. And of course, they come up with their own plan in terms of reopening.
So we should expect some kind of report or information from them on their plans and how they're proceeding?
Yes, and we can get that set up.
Yeah, probably a good idea.
At the next board meeting.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone. I know this has been the craziest opening of school that we've probably ever seen. So I really appreciate all the work that's gone into it. I know there are 12 and 14-hour days that a lot of people have put in. Again, I'm appreciative. Thank you.
Mr. Evans, as far as rapid testing goes, is there a timeline for something like that when it could be available to the community?
They are already piloting some of that, trying to validate some of that. CU is validating it. They started this week trying to validate a test that they have. CSU, Fort Collins, has 3 rapid tests in the pipeline. And I don't know the timeline of that, but I think that they're trying to get it out as soon as possible.
And when you say rapid tests, do the results come back immediately? Is that how it works? Or?
It's like a rapid flu test, so you can get it, and within 20 minutes or something, 30 minutes, you can get a result.
Okay. And do we have any expectation for what's going to happen in the fall as far as modeling? Because I know we all hear about a second wave coming. It's going to get worse in the fall. Is that something that we can expect?
Yeah, so the modeling currently, if we can maintain our current social distancing, looks pretty good. It doesn't look like we're going to overwhelm our hospitals. It doesn't look like, looks like it's manageable. And that's really what we're trying to do, is learn to live with this virus and manage it rather than, shut everything down. Mm-hmm. If the social distancing changes significantly, the model shifts significantly, and we could be in a bind pretty quickly. As we saw in July, that trajectory changed rapidly. Mm-hmm. So the modeling, though, is limited by the information that we have and the data we have. And as I said earlier, there's no modeling yet that can predict what's going to happen when colleges and community colleges and K through 12 open up across the state. There's really no way for them to predict that, and even at a national level, there's not that data yet. Only some data that they've been able to glean from some other countries, but it's just not predictable yet. So that modeling, I expect, that's why they expect to revise this even after Labor Day. They expect those first couple of weeks are going to give them a lot of data to start informing that model, and I suspect, as we move into September and probably October, that modeling will become more clear.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here today, and thank you for your leadership in these challenging times. We really do appreciate all of your support.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morey, for all of your hard
both.
work, and your staff as well.
Thank you. You are more than welcome. And now, as soon as we have the video up and
I forgot about the video.
And ready, our communications team has been working to put together a video for our families and community. I believe this is the first showing. And hopefully this will help to tell the story of what it's going to look like when our students come back to school.
No,
The opening of the 2020 through 21 school year is unlike any previous Planning for the opening of the 2020 through 21 school year is unlike any previous year in our nation's or district's history. Amidst an unpredictable global pandemic, it is imperative that we plan to help protect students, teachers, administrators, and staff, and slow the spread of COVID-19 while still providing equitable access to a high-quality pre-K through 12 education, so deserved by our students. In Pueblo School District 60, the first day of school will be on August 31st, 2020. This delayed start ensures sufficient time for our buildings to implement health and safety guidelines. This year, every student in D60 will receive their own district-issued technology device that will be used daily, both in the classroom and at home. We are proud to be able to provide a choice to our families concerning the educational delivery model that best meets the needs of each family. The D60 Return to School plan consists of options for families. K-5 students will attend 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday. Been working diligently to implement many health and safety measures to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. Here is what parents and students can expect. Upon arrival and throughout the day, a 3 to 6 foot social distance will be enforced. Desks in classrooms will be spaced further apart, and traffic patterns in hallways will be determined to minimize two-way traffic during passing. In order to attend classes in person, all staff and students are required to wear a mask. Masks should be worn appropriately and must cover the nose and mouth. At a minimum, D60 will provide one cloth mask to every student and employee of the district. It would be helpful for students to use a lanyard, string, or strap that can be adapted to allow students to hang their masks around their necks when masks are not in use, such as during lunch, recess, and any other mask break that may be allowed. Upon arrival, each student and staff will participate in an entry health screening process. If students are ill or have symptoms, they should remain at home. Temperatures will be taken. Any staff or student with an elevated temperature will not be permitted to attend. We will institute a cleaning regimen that is frequent, targeted, and of a scope sufficient to reduce transmission. In addition, frequent hand washing will be encouraged. Proper hand washing protocols will be taught to all students, and frequent hand washing will be encouraged and scheduled whenever feasible when in classrooms with sinks, during restroom visits. Hand sanitizer will be provided in every classroom and office space. Students will be directed to wash hands or use provided hand sanitizer directly before eating lunch. Students will be directed to wash hands or use hand sanitizer after using shared equipment. As an example, athletic equipment on the playground. It will be extremely helpful if students bring a backpack with them to school in order to carry personal belongings and materials with them, as lockers will not be utilized. Backpacks will also be necessary to carry and protect the district-issued technology device each student will receive this year. D60's bus transportation will operate under normal schedules, and school buses will be disinfected between routes. All students, bus drivers, and staff will be required to wear masks on the bus. Additional disposable masks will be provided for any student who may have forgotten to bring their masks with them. Students will be limited to 1 per seat unless the students are siblings, in which case they will be asked to sit together 2 per seat. In D60, we understand that the 2020 through 21 school year is unlike any previous year in our nation's or district's history. We know that each family has a personal choice to make when it comes to the educational options for their children. We are striving to adapt to the continually changing conditions related to the COVID-19 pandemic, while also providing equitable access to a high-quality pre-K through 12 education in a safe environment. Pueblo School District 60, preparing students for a life of purpose and
policy EBBA, prevention of disease, infection, transmission. Dr. Kusevich?
Good afternoon, Superintendent Macaluso, President Voss, and members of the board. Today I'm bringing forth.
Okay. Good afternoon, Superintendent Macaluso, President Voss, and members of the board. I am bringing forth two policies today. One is EBBA, with its accompanying rule, EBBAR, the prevention of disease, infections, transmissions. We are bringing this forward at the request of CASB, who recommended we review these policies and put in stronger language that's more emphatic and more specific, given our current environment. This is a first reading of the policy. It has been thoroughly reviewed in tandem with our nursing team and been vetted by our legal counsel. The second policy is JLCC, communicable infectious diseases, also recommended minor changes but with stronger language from CASB, also thoroughly reviewed by our nursing team and vetted by our legal counsel. This is just the first reading, and I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
Dr. Wright, do you have any questions?
Do not, but thank you very much for your presentation.
Mr. Farrell?
My question isn't necessarily related to the changes made, but in the first paragraph of policy JLCC, I notice it uses HIV/AIDS as an example. Is that language that was suggested? I know there's a lot of stigma around HIV/AIDS. I don't know if it's necessary.
They did not recommend we change that, so we did not.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Clementi, any questions?
Just one, and I'm an English teacher. And I'm sorry, I just can't.
We'll fix it.
Lose that. No, I just wonder why in EBBA the change was to must when the others, the change was to will. Is
That came from CASB. I asked the same question and did not get a sufficient answer, but we felt we would follow their lead. Yeah. I can change that if you're interested. On second reading, we can make it all uniform if you would like.
Well, I don't know if anybody else cares, but to me, will is not conditional.
That's true.
And it's directive, where must implies some future condition. And will, to me, is much stronger than either shall or must.
We will absolutely.
I would ask that Mr. Bump weigh in. Is there any reason that we would not change the wording on that, Mr. Bump?
No, I think the word must is much more emphatic, and I think that we should change it in the regulation as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. My clarification, did he say must was more emphatic or will was more emphatic? I've got to clarify that from my understanding.
Are you recommending that we include?
I believe must. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Bump.
I believe must is a stronger word, a stronger message. I believe the consistency between the regulation and the policy is important.
So you would recommend we use the word must rather than will?
That is correct.
We will make the correction. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to number 2.
Thank you, Ms. Kusevich. So those were both of your
Those are the two, yes.
policies. So at this time, we'll move on to the next policies. I believe that there are 4 that Mr. Bravo will be bringing forth. So I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Bravo, who serves as Executive Director of Student Support Services. Mr. Bravo?
Good afternoon, President Voss, Superintendent Macaluso, and members of the board. This will be a first reading of a series of policies that require revision as recommended by the Colorado Association of School Boards. In your board materials, you will find red lines of the policies requiring revision. These policies have been reviewed by Mr. Bump and they do reflect his recommendations. The first three policies that I will address are revisions due to the current climate in relation to COVID-19. First policy is EBCE, school closings and cancellations. In short, this policy recognizes that to preserve the health and safety of students and staff, it may be necessary to close district facilities or dismiss schools early during emergencies. The revisions to this policy include, and the change in this policy is in the first paragraph, and it states that the superintendent, after consultation with appropriate authorities, has the ability to close schools or dismiss schools early due to emergencies that threaten the safety of students and staff, and shift the instructional program to a fully virtual learning platform or other remote learning option. Shall I go ahead and move on to the next policy? Sure. And then take questions? Okay. The next policy I will address is IC/ICA, which is focuses on school year, school calendar, and instructional time. This policy states that at the end of each school year that the Board of Education will determine the length of time school will be in session the next school year. The policy also defines the actively engaged and in the instructional process as the time when students are working toward achieving educational objectives under the supervision of a licensed teacher. The policy also defines what does not count as being actively engaged in the educational process. Revisions of the policy include, and these revisions begin on page 2 in red. The highlights of the additions to this policy include, for the 2021 school year, the definition of actively engaged in the educational process includes instruction delivered electronically or the use of other types of independent remote work time provided under the supervision of a licensed teacher. Additionally, the licensed teacher does not require the teacher be in the student's physical presence. Student contact days may include remote learning days as a result of public health and safety measures. Remote learning may include a variety of methods, all of which would be approved by the district. Remote learning options will vary depending on the school level of the student and will have the ability to shift to a fully virtual online platform due to health risks. Teacher-pupil instruction and contact time occurs when students are actively engaged in the educational process, and a few would include the presence during in-person instruction and passing periods between in-person classes, working on assignments at home or designed to be completely remote, or logging into the online learning platform. Those are just a few. Students engaged in in-person instruction, remote learning, and a combination of the two will cover the same academic content to the greatest extent possible. Attendance will be recorded at least once daily. Again, that will depend on the level. The next policy I'm going to address will be file KI, visitors to schools. This policy outlines the process for allowing visitors to our schools. Visitors are welcomed in our buildings as long as visiting guidelines are met. The revisions to this policy, however, include that visiting privileges may be limited or denied or revoked by the school administrator based on considerations of the student or staff health and safety. The final policy that I will address is file JH, student absences and excuses. The policy recognizes the importance of student attendance in relation to student success in school. Every parent or guardian is to ensure that every child under their care and supervision receives an education. The policy defines excused and unexcused absences. Revisions to the policies includes added language to the policy, which is on the bottom of page 1. If a student is in an out-of-home placement, absences due to court appearances and participation in court-ordered activities will be excused. The absences will be verified by the student-assigned social worker. Parents may, another addition is that parents may petition the Board of Education for exceptions relating to the unexcused policy. The maximum number of unexcused absences a student may incur before judicial proceedings is 10 days during a calendar year. Chronic absenteeism is defined in this policy, which includes a student who has a total of 10 days absent in a school year. Excused or unexcused will define as chronically absent. Absences due to suspension or expulsion are not counted when identifying a student as chronically absent. In this case, principals will develop a plan to improve student attendance. Some pieces of that plan could include the implementation of the RTI process, provide assistance to students and guardian based on a root cause analysis, again, developing goals, monitoring grades, etc. Revisions also include that in the event of an expulsion, makeup work will not be given by the building administrator. Instead, the district will provide an alternative educational program for an expelled student, which is currently in place with Paragon. Within the information that I just presented in the JH policy, a lot of these things are already in practice. They just were not in policy. That's why that information will be added, or is recommended that we add that. That's all that I have at this time.
Dr. Wright, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you for your presentation. I have one question, please. In policy JH, on page 3, under number 8, the second sentence says, when practicable, the students, parents, guardians will participate in the development of the plan. I wanted to know your criteria for determining what is practicable.
I think when we're working with families and coming up with a plan to help them, we want the parent to be part of that plan building, and every effort will be made to make sure that that happens. Mrs. Macaluso, would you like to add to that?
I would just say, I think that wording is there just for the practicality of it. I think in rare cases, a family is not able to do that, but in almost every circumstance, a plan doesn't work if you don't have the right stakeholders at the table, and it's not a total wraparound services. So I think that just kind of gives us some general guidance and kind of gives us some latitude in terms of allowing for all those contextual factors that may occur.
Thank you.
Judge Mays?
I did understand all you said, Superintendent. So please repeat the part about the parents' participation. What would be the circumstances under which they would not be able to participate?
So I can't specifically speak to all the circumstances, but there are rare occasions where maybe a parent refuses to participate or is unable to participate. I think that would be a rarity, because anytime that we have put a plan in place, a plan of support for a student, we would want those, all those stakeholders at the table to support to implement the plan.
Dr. Wright, any more
Okay,
questions?
it's just the wording of it. I think the wording just leaves much to, I just think the wording is just so general, it just leaves door for, I don't know how to phrase it, except I just wish there's a way to say it more clearly so it doesn't sound like the parents would not be included. I hear what the superintendent is saying. I think what she's saying is clearer than what is specified in the writing.
So
you.
I don't know if Mr. Bump would have a better word or a way to express that, because I think the intent is that parents, we always want parents involved, but we also recognize that there may be occasions where that's not possible. We don't want that process to stop as a result, but Mr. Bump, would you have any suggestions on how to make that clearer?
So I would endorse the language as stated. As Mr. Bravo said, the intent is to involve the parents, but just in the case with any matter involving students, sometimes that's difficult to do or impossible in some cases. We would not want a mandate to involve the parents to prevent us from implementing the necessary plan for the benefit of the student.
Thank you, Mr. Bump.
Dr. Wright, do you have anything else?
That's all, thank you.
Mr. Farrell? Ms. Clementi?
Thank you, and thanks for all of your work. I have just one question on ICICA. All of that new work applies to the coming school year only, is that correct?
Yes.
Then my question is then either would it be more effective if it were a separate policy? And if not, then I'd like to see that first phrase or that some heading that shows that from here on out, everything here applies to the 2021 school year. The phrase at the beginning of the first paragraph may or may not still be in people's mind when they look at the last paragraph. Does that make sense?
And Mrs. Macaluso, I'm going to have you.
I think that's a point well taken, Barb. Initially, when we looked at this, we had much discussion around the resolution that the board passed, right? That was specific to our context and specific to the situation that we're in. And I initially thought that maybe the resolution would suffice as opposed to changing the board policy for a limited amount of time or for the year 2021. Mr. Bump, again, I would ask that you would weigh into that in regard to can we bring clarity so that this is specific to the 1 year or
just pull it out and make it ICB. And then
right, or a separate policy in itself is what Barb's asking.
Yes, I can. Thank you. I think in looking at this, it occurred to me too that we should have separate headings to make it clear. I think we should stay with one policy just for ease of getting to the right place. But I think maybe the second paragraph, we could start that out with something like, except as provided for the 2020-21 school year as provided below, and highlight the fact that we need to read down below this. The other thing is that the board does remember, right, we did adopt a resolution that delegated to some of these issues to the superintendent and also defined some of these matters. But based upon work that Bruce Richards, the registrar of the district, did, and finding an addendum that was issued by the Colorado Department of Education's audit division concerning auditing student count on the counting days and periods, we wanted to be much more specific and have it in policy because those guidelines now, those auditing guidelines refer to policy as opposed to resolution. So it looks somewhat redundant, but I think it is not. It's a little bit more specific in many respects, and having it in a policy gives it that much more emphasis when it's time to deal with the student count.
Then I would request for the second reading that simply the first 6 words for the 2021 school year be elevated to a heading and bolded, and then it would be clear that everything after that applies to this school year.
So noted.
Thank you very much, and thanks for all of your work on these.
Thank you, Mr. Bravo.
Thank you.
We'll move on now to 11.0, the consent agenda. Are there any agenda items anyone would like to be removed, to be voted on separately? Ms. Clementi?
I don't have one to be removed, but I'd like to just point out, in the personnel report, we again see several support personnel, paras, who have gone through the education and the experience that they need and are now employed as certified people and employees. And I'm just thrilled to see that as a continuing thing. It's not a, I don't know if I want to say a focus, but it's a momentum that I think we put in place or tried to begin several years ago, and we're seeing the fruit now, and it's really, really exciting.
We have really tried to nurture that, and I'll let Mr. DeCesaro speak to that a bit.
Yeah, I would say I agree. It's just a great source to find new teachers, new counselors, and it's a resource there in our system. They understand our kids, and it's something we want to continue to help them to do, because it's a great tool for us.
Thank you. It's great to see the results.
I will move that we approve consent agenda items 2 through 13 as presented.
Second.
I'll call for the vote, please.
Ms. Clementi?
Aye.
Mr. Farrell?
Aye.
Judge Mays?
Aye.
Mr. Voss?
Aye.
Dr. Wright? Aye.
Next up, we have 12.0 action items, Superintendent Macaluso.
Thank you, President Voss. At this time, I'd like to recommend the following leadership appointment. That would be for Miss Morgan Lee Kemp, current science specialist at the Administration Services Center, to assistant principal, Bessemer Academy, effective August 3rd, 2020.
I will move that we approve the superintendent's recommendation for appointment as presented in today's board materials.
Second.
Discussion? I'll call for the vote, please.
Ms. Clementi?
I think this is a terrific move. Congratulations, and aye.
Mr. Farrell?
Aye.
Judge Mays?
Aye.
Mr. Voss?
Aye.
Dr. Wright? Aye.
Next up, we have executive session. So I will move that the Board of Education meets in executive
Mr.
session.
Voss, may I have just a second, please?
Sure.
For those of us that are here, you could see that I've got an advertising mask on, and it's the Colorado Lottery. And I specifically wore it today because I am a member of the Colorado Lottery Commission. And yesterday, at our Lottery Commission meeting, Mr. Andy Stein from the BEST Group did the presentation and talked about the process that applicants need to go through that could be, in many cases, a several-year project in order to get approved for BEST funding. And I mentioned to him that we were very fortunate this year and are the recipient of 2 BEST grants. And I just want everyone to know that the lottery, where it comes into play with BEST, is that we have 3 beneficiaries that we need to take care of off the top. That's GOCO, the Conservation Trust Fund, and the Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And if we're able to satisfy all of our requirements to them in terms of money, then whatever is left over, called a spillover, goes into the BEST thing and the BEST funding. And that is something that I will tell you everyone on the Lottery Commission is excited about in terms of being able to help build excellent schools today. So that's the reason for the advertisement. As a commissioner, I am prohibited from buying lottery tickets, but I would encourage each of you to go out and buy 100 tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Mays. So I will move that the Board of Education meets in executive session to discuss potential lease or sale of real property pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, Parent 4, Parent A, legal matters, and to receive legal advice in the opinion of counsel on specific legal questions and pending and threatened litigation pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, Parent 4, Parent B, determining positions relative to matters that are or will be subject to contract negotiations other than collective bargaining contracts, developing strategy for those negotiations, and instructing negotiators pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, Parent 4, Parent E, and personnel matters, including the superintendent's evaluation and actions, updates, and superintendent recommendations involving individual employees pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, Parent 4, Parent F.
Second.
Call for the vote, please.
Ms. Clemente?
Aye.
Mr. Farrell?
Aye.
Judge Mays?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Dr. Wright? Aye.
All right. Thank you, everyone.